All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Want to welcome all of you to our kickoff for the Beyond Compliance webinar and podcast series. My name is Brian Sharp. I'm with Safety Chain Software, and first we just want to say thank you. We're really excited to kick this series off. We know a number of you have joined us in the past over, gosh, I think it's been over 5 years now. We've been running the FSMA Fridays, which has been was really an industry first, but really kind of became a thing of its own. We really wanted to introduce kind of the next layer of training and education for the community, and the response has just been awesome. So hundreds of you signed up, and we're just super excited to kick this off today. I think we got a great topic to do it as we jump into the new year. So today's topic is going to be FSMA technology and audits and how a food company automated the audit process. And joining us is Bridgette Krueger from Sokol and Company, and we'll hear more about her and her story. And this is really kind of part case study and part training and part conversation. So we'll be digging into that in just a few minutes. But one of the things we wanted to do, since we're just kind of getting started with this series, is give a sense of where we're trying to go with it. So we've named it Beyond Compliance, and the idea is to create an educational series focused around strategy, trends, tips, and really bring in thought leaders and consultants and fellow practitioners like Bridgette is doing today, to give you some real tangible stuff, things that you can actually apply in your company. So regardless of how big you are, where you are in the country, what type of vertical or industry that you're in within food safety and other related areas, we really hope that you'll take away something tangible and tactical that you can apply. So we really want these to be for you and by you. So we encourage you to connect with us, share your feedback, share the topics you'd like to hear, presenters you love listening to, and we'll be doing these each and every month. And we hope you enjoy them and hope you come back for more. A couple of housekeeping notes, if you will, as we get going. Obviously, behind the scenes is Safety Chain Software, and we're really proud and excited to host this series. And for those of you that aren't familiar with us, we are a food quality management system. So we are really specialized in helping reduce the cost, waste, and risk as you run your food safety and quality programs. So as you go through this series or other parts of your day, you're going through your planning and you have some needs in the area of food safety, food quality, supplier compliance, or others, we'd really love to learn about what you're doing and how we can help, and certainly enjoy connecting with all of you offline. A few things in terms of the webinar itself. We're hoping to set kind of a different format. These are oftentimes very serious topics, but we're not going to take ourselves that seriously. So these are meant to be informal, conversational. I think the way I would describe it is if we were all hanging out at a trade show, this is the kind of conversation we'd be having, right? So sharing ideas, sharing strategies, but not trying to talk so conceptual, but really give you some tactical takeaways. So we hope you enjoy the format that we've created. Some of our presenters are on stage all the time, and some of them it's kind of new for them. But the idea is to give you great content. And with that, we want it to be about you and for you. So ask questions. The best presentations, the best content is really going to be when we can connect it to the audience. So you have a little Q&A box there. Really encourage you to jump in and ask any type of questions you have. You'll notice that the attendee panel is closed. So we have a ton of you here, which is great, and we'll get to as many as we can, but we want you to know that the questions you send won't be broadcast to everybody, and we'll do our best to get to them all. And what we don't get to, we have Q&A at the end. We also will make sure and follow up offline as well. One of the most common questions, which I'll try and knock out first, is will this be recorded? And yes, we are recording, and yes, we will be sharing a link along with the PowerPoint deck. Bridgette has a ton of great content, and we'll be posting that up on SlideShare on our site and also sending you a link via email. So you can sit back and relax. You can take notes, whichever works best for you, but we'll be passing along all the great content that comes from the series. And any technical stuff, as I mentioned before we got started there's a little chat box up in your top right. You can click on that, and we've got our team hard at work behind the scenes that will do our best to help you. I'm certainly no technical guru, but usually the old, if you're having challenges, the old log out, log in is usually the the save all. If not, maybe alternate your audio option. If you're on the computer and having some challenges, go to the phone option, and vice versa. So that should help, hopefully, with the webinar experience. So without further ado, I want to jump right into this month's training topic and introduce you to our very special guest presenter, and we're so thrilled to have her for a few reasons. One, Bridgette is part of Sokol and Company, which are great customers of ours here at Safety Chain. But beyond that, as many of you may know, that they were also the winners of the SQF Practitioner of the Year. So I thought it was very timely to be able to see if I can convince her to come in and share some of her wisdom and experience with us. So Bridgette is the Director of Food Safety and Quality Assurance at Sokol and Company. She has over 7 years experience in the food safety, quality, microbiology, and sanitarian roles, covering a bunch of industries including tobacco, water, and other related food industries. Currently, she oversees all food safety, quality, and regulatory compliance, so I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that kind of responsibility. She has a Bachelor's of Science from Illinois State University in Biology, and we were just talking about this, a really interesting combination here of a Master's of Science from Purdue University in Molecular Virology, and I think she'll be expanding on that just a little bit more. So, Bridgette, are you there? Can you hear me okay?
I can. My button works. It's great.
Oh, your button works. Hey, we got like half the battle handled now. That's awesome. So, so first, welcome. Thank you for making the time. We're really excited to have you, and I'm going to get out of the way and kind of let you dive right in.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Great handoff. Great intro. I really appreciate it. So I guess first and foremost, just again, a little bit more background about me, not to go through a whole resume, but like many people in the industry, you probably come from a variety of backgrounds, but I imagine a majority of you are food scientists or have a degree in biology or have some experience in manufacturing. So just from me, just so you all know, I actually started my undergrad degree, very general, very basic, in biology at Illinois State University, small liberal arts college in Illinois, real close to the University of Illinois. And then upon graduating, wasn't sure what I wanted to do, wasn't sure about manufacturing, if I wanted to go on and like become a dentist. So I decided to jump into a contract position in the pharmaceutical industry where it was very much, you know, hands-on cleaning rooms and working with vaccines and, you know, a lot of the pharmaceutical technical like aseptic technique. After realizing that really wasn't kind of what I wanted to do, wanted to move on and do different things, I decided, you know, I'm going to go back to school, and I pursued a degree at Purdue University in Indiana, where, much like Brian had mentioned, it's in molecular virology. So really what that means is it's understanding how we get sick and why we get sick from viruses, bacteria, mostly viruses, of course, but at the same time on a molecular level. So what proteins are being used in the body to, you know, what is the virus hijacking to really kind of replicate itself. So upon graduating, again, I mean, it's a specialty, right? Molecular virology. What in the heck can you do with that? Just really kind of threw my resume out there, and I was recruited by a company called Altria, or also known as U.S. Smokeless Tobacco. So I worked in big tobacco for a couple of years as a microbiologist slash sanitarian slash supervisor, kind of a variety of things, trade of all, you know, wore a bunch of hats, jack of all trades. And then I decided that, you know, I want to try something a little different, got into bottled water, so that's, you know, consumables, not necessarily food, but consumables, and there it was more of a quality manager role. So there's a variety of things that happen there, and I definitely could talk your ear off on anything you want to know about tobacco and or water. Spent a couple of years in the water industry, very interesting, lots of micro work too there, and then recently got a role with Sokol and Company. So Sokol and Company, it's a great family-owned company that's been around for a little while. It was founded in 1895, and it really got started out as a grocery store by the Sokol family. And then through the generations, they kind of changed and adapted, which was very similar to kind of what my career path was. So, of course, you know, molecular virology to tobacco to water to now food. So they were ever growing, expanding, and changing. So they started, like I said, as grocery, then went to spices and selling spices. then moved to more of a retail, and then started really diving into the industry or large food production in the industry. So the manufacturing facility that I work at, it's about 100,000 square feet. About half of that is dedicated to food manufacturing, and then the other half is dedicated to warehousing systems. And for me, there's quite a variety and diversity in the products that we make. So it's everything from sweet to savory. So that includes ribbons that go in ice cream, which is amazing, especially when you walk into R&D every day and they're like, hey, you want some ice cream? Also salsas, we make anchovy pastes, as well as a few other products like barbecue sauces, marshmallow nut butters, things that you would spread on bread, jams, jellies, and a few other things in between. So because of that diversity, you could imagine that there's quite a variety of things to be looking after and monitoring. We run and have all 8 allergens in-house, and in addition to that, 2 international, well, I guess you would consider sensitivities or allergens, which includes celery and seeds or mustard seeds. So that program is quite robust, really trying to understand our allergen program. Also, we have a variety of certifications that we have to maintain because of our customers and the variety of products we make, which include halal, kosher, GFCO, or gluten-free. We also do organic on a variety of products. And then there are certain things that customers do require that we stay to and true to. So it's always growing, expanding, and things just get complex quickly. So in addition to that, we have been SQF certified and level 3 for about 9 years. Each year, year over year, we've had exceptional ratings, so that's a 96 or above. And if you can imagine, you know, a building from probably 1960 has some things that, you know, are not very technical or usable today, which is great, but it makes being SQF level 3 definitely a challenge at times, but a good challenge in the way that it's constantly growing, adapting, changing, things are getting put in, so it's really staying on your toes. And as Brian mentioned, just last year in 2017, SQF awarded us, or nominated and awarded us, an SQF Practitioner of the Year award, which is a great honor, and we feel very privileged to have that. So I hope what I can give you today helps you, all of you, in really either, you know, pursuing something that you thought, you know, might be challenging to try, whether that's automating documentation or, you know, just updating something in your SQF system or plan. But it's, I think anyone that has any type of certification from a food safety standpoint, whether it be BRC or SQF, FSSC, that one's always hard to say, any of those, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you do have that pertain to that as well. We're all kind of on this journey and trying to learn as we go, so be happy to share my experience, and please feel free to share yours as well, because I think that's the best way we learn. And then lastly, just kind of a background on Sokol is that we conduct multiple customer audits, and we have multiple customer audits coming in all the time. They're regulars. We see them all the time. We are not USDA, but we do have the FDA that do show up on surprise inspections as well as SQF. But even below, you can see we make products for Baskin-Robbins, Nestle, Ken's, Jim Beam, Maranthia, and they come in all the time. There's quite a few that are on the docket this year to review products with and speak with. So we are constantly, me and my team, in the state of identifying, you know, anything that's out of compliance and just generally in audits all the time, which has been and will be a hang-up for us in the near future and consistently, just because of all the work that goes into it. And I'm sure most of you know, with those audits, and even kind of like on a bigger standpoint with FSMA, this whole regulations and legislation that have come down the pipeline. So just again, at a glance, and most of you already know this, we did have in the food industry the final Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA, which was signed by President Obama in 2011. So we are now in 2018, and things are really starting to roll for us, as we all know. Compliance dates were established, you know, based on business size and annual sales, and so some big companies and small companies are trickling in at different times, so not everyone's at the same point from a FSMA standpoint, but we're all trying to get there, right? So constant in motion and trying to understand what the FDA is requiring, especially from a FSMA standpoint. So as we all know, now we have a lot of preventative controls for human foods and food safety. I mean, there's some people that probably in the pet food industry that kind of understand this as well. I mean, and this goes from supplier approval all the way to, you know, getting the pallet on the truck and headed out the door. So lots of new regulations in place, but luckily for those who are and have been in accredited food program, a lot of these programs that you have in place probably assist you with getting where you need to be within FSMA. So that's a plus for all those that are there. And those who aren't there, you're learning and getting there. So good job. You're doing great. Keep it up. So as we know, rules are intended to set food safety requirements for food facilities, again, that process, package, and store food, so that's everybody, right, supply chain to who's in between making the product to, you know, who's shipping it out the door. Something new, most of you know about HACCP or Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points, but now FDA requires what we call food safety plans. So it's similar, but it's, you know, kind of looking at everything as a whole and really trying to identify and dig deep on, you know, what's potentially a hazard and what are you going to do to prevent that hazard rather than how are you controlling it. New also this year is a big impact on food defense plans and food fraud. So as we well, maybe not most of us, but some of us know about the melanin issue that caused some uproar regarding baby food, and basically it's an additional protein that was added to the food product, and it caused deaths in infants, a lot of illnesses. So food fraud is kind of a big thing that now in my industry, or at least in my company at Sokol, we're trying to really tackle, and then as well as food defense. As we all know, 9/11 was a big deal for our country, and really trying to mitigate any risk from a food standpoint is definitely paramount, especially because how easy it can be. And if anyone produces anything that goes across the country, you know, it's really not likely, but from a standpoint of it could affect a lot of people very quickly if we don't really mitigate that risk. So again, something else that was introduced recently within FDA FSMA food safety. In addition to that, PCQI, as most of you know, you now need to have someone that's trained internally that has been food safety trained, at least one person. So those are really the people that are, you know, doing your food safety plans, HACCP plans, really understanding what the programs are. And then lastly, like I mentioned before, FSMA is very similar to other agencies like SQF, BRC, FSCC. So those people that have those particular programs or folks that come in to do audits, you should probably have a pretty good grasp at this point. But as you know, audits take tons and tons and tons and tons of time. So within FSMA, when these first rolled out, I remember thinking to myself, oh my goodness, like there's so much to do, and do I have enough time? And you know, my little pictorial here of this cartoon, it's really thinking is like, is this just more work? I mean, are we really doing more that we should be doing? And like really, what does it all mean? So especially for my company that was established in 1895, I mean, this is kind of old, right? You know, are we ready? Are we really going to be able to get to where we need to be, maintain what we need to be? If the FDA comes in, oh my goodness, like, am I going to be able to provide them with the appropriate information that they need, and how quick? I mean, we've got boxes and boxes and boxes of paperwork, just documentation, like where is it, who knows? So again, being accredited by SQF and being level 3 has really helped with the alignment of FSMA, because that was always the ultimate fear is, are we where we need to be? I don't want our plant shut down. But again, process, right? That's really the hang up, and I'm probably speaking to the choir, right, with most of you. When an auditor comes in and says, hey, can I see this policy? Hey, can I see your verification? Hey, can I see this documentation? Maybe not necessarily a scramble, but you're probably trying to figure out, you know, where is this? How can I get it to them quickly? How can I, you know, move on to something else? Because it's great to have auditors there, and it's great for them to see your process and really kind of show off what you're doing. Because, I mean, from a quality standpoint, R&D standpoint, production standpoint, purchasing standpoint, I mean, people do a lot of work, right? There's a lot of work that goes into manufacturing food, and you should take pride in that, because it's very important what we're doing, and we're trying to feed people. But at the same time, it really kind of takes away from your day to have an auditor come in, say, 3-4 days, and if anyone's had experience with the FDA, they can come in, you know, 4 or 5 days, depending on what they find, and they want a swab, and it takes a lot of time away from your day-to-day activities or other things that have to be going on. So really, not only is it, you know, the process, but it's like, are the right people in place to implement this process and getting these documents and getting everything that you need in these interviews, and is everyone really ready and prepared? And so for me, the food safety changes, you know, do I have the appropriate people in place that are going to be able to answer these questions that the auditor has? But also, are they going to be able to get me what I need to get to this auditor in time? Because I don't want to have to sit blankly and stare at them and say, I don't, you know, let me find this, or, you know, give me a couple of hours. I'd rather have it ready and available at my fingertips. So from the standpoint of where I'm at, you know, how can we, as a company, we thought, how can we do this? Like, how can we make it better, easier, so that way it's just a click of a button, or it's, you know, hey, let's open the spreadsheet and there's everything there. That's maybe less manual, maybe much less, you know, labor intensive, something that's more easily available to anyone. So say I'm not at the facility and the FDA shows up, can my SQF coordinator host them? Or, you know, maybe he's in Tahiti on vacation and I'm still, you know, I don't know, out on the countryside on a vacation, you know, who's going to be able to really get to what's needed, get this information that's required. So like I mentioned before, one of the biggest problems that at least I experience with audits is tackling the paperwork problem. So for a long time, we in my company had documentation, and a lot of times to fix an issue or if an additional customer audit came in, they would require something that needed to be checked or identified or signed off on. So that's adding additional paperwork. So not only is it hard for our production team to get through everything, it takes a really long time for our quality process and system to review all the documents, make sure everything's in spec, but also like locating it, you know, is it easily accessible? And then, I mean, how many times are we reading through paperwork and there's pieces missing or things that aren't filled out, lined out, signed out? You know, how can we really improve this plan and this process? And not only is it important, you know, for us, you know, to get through audits, but at the same time, it's really to kind of like, you know, seal the deal on, is everything in place? Do we really have these robust systems that we talk about and all these policies that we have in place? So for us, what we decided to do within our company is really kind of look at an automated process for documentation and paperwork and bringing it out to our folks out on the floor, but also really training our folks internally to figure out, you know, like, can this be done? Is it possible? You know, change is really, really hard, especially when you work for a company that's been around for a really long time or people that have been in the industry for a really long time. And to get that buy-in, is it possible to get, you know, this working? So from that standpoint, what we tried to do, again, was implement electronic documentation. So really what we did was we took all the existing forms, and let me be honest, we had probably 30 plus per line, per room, per lot, per product type. And like I mentioned, we do everything sweet to savory. So, I mean, imagine over 150 different products that have some overlapping documentation, but a lot of it is its own, and then in addition to that, customer auditors coming in and requiring and requesting additional things. That gets kind of out of hand. I mean, we have tons and tons and tons of boxes of documentation that have to be reviewed, and you have a set time frame that you have to review it. So how do we do it? How did we get there? So what we did was we used a lot of the existing documentation that we had, and luckily enough for us, the system that we chose was able to upload a lot of it into the system directly. So it wasn't tons of manual entering, even though it did at a point for a couple of weeks get to that point. It was great that we already had processes in place and documentation in place that could easily be implemented or uploaded into, you know, for us, we used a program called Safety Chain, but you could use any really, but Safety Chains really worked well for us. Able to upload this documentation. So then from there, we used a surface or a tablet that was not breakable, that, I shouldn't say not breakable, but that wasn't a case that was not breakable, because for us and anyone that's in food manufacturing, some of the things that you really do worry about, right, are glass breakage, plastic, foreign material, things falling into kettles, or, you know, your own cooking equipment, and how are you going to mitigate that risk? You know, you try to get rid of it altogether, and now, oh my goodness, we're bringing something else into the line. How are we going to fix that? So what we had done was for a couple weeks at a time, take different sections or different people from different locations within the facility, brought them into our training room and really walked them step by step through the process on how you use it, how user-friendly is it. And what was great about doing this was the people that are actually doing the very difficult and challenging work on the floor, making the food, making sure we're hitting all of our CCPs, making sure we're safe, they got and gave us a lot of feedback on, you know, hey, this doesn't really work, or like, I can't scroll this way, or this isn't comfortable for me, where can I put this tablet? And that was really helpful for us, not only to really kind of make the system better, but make the system best for them. Because in quality, for us at Sokol, we're really a support group for the production. What we try to do from a standpoint of quality is really, I mean, obviously we want to make sure that we get good quality food and safe product out the door, but we're not the ones making it. Again, we're kind of the support group. So one of the great things that we've noticed about the system that we've implemented after a couple weeks of training, after getting feedback, getting buy-in, getting the right documents in there, trying to mitigate and get rid of like any typos, issues, or problems, and really kind of making the questions that are being asked out on the floor rather than just paperwork that they're so used to, getting them to really think about what they're doing was really helpful. So the system itself is very user-friendly, very quick and easy, sign in, and then much like an iPhone, and most of you probably have had experience with iPhones, tablets, Surfaces, it was a drop-down menu or a type-in or a checkbox or something very easy to go through versus putting in ingredients, stirring, walking to, you know, the side where all that documentation is, getting a pen, signing it, writing it, Xing out things, filling in things, potentially forgetting, spilling something on it. So it's much more quick, direct, handheld, user-friendly. And then for us in quality, what's really great is I don't have as many boxes as I once did. Of course, there's some systems that haven't fully integrated yet that we're still working on, but I would say maybe my paperwork is down 30, 40, 50% to what it was before. My packets, while, you know, do still contain some hard copy things, a lot of it's all automated through the system. So once that information is added or entered into the electronic data system, it gets immediately emailed to me, so that way I can look through it and see if there's any issues or problems. What's also really great about the system is if something is not in specification or is out of spec, and you could build this probably in additional software, it highlights it red or makes an X box. So instead of a week later reading through the documentation because I have piles and piles of it, it tells me directly, hey, this is not in spec, what's going on? So then I can go directly to that operator, to that supervisor, to that production lead and say, hey, I saw this on the tab, like, what's going on? Did something break, bust? You know, why didn't we reach temperature? Can you at least put in a note here as to why, so that way my hold and release program can be thorough and we can get the right information, which was really great. So in addition to that, we have proficiency in our process. So like I mentioned, those instant notifications, oh my goodness, it saves so much time, energy. I mean, yeah, of course I still have to go to the floor, but it's real time. It's not 3 days later, 4 days later, 2 days later, a week later. It's the day they submit it, at the end of their shift or during their shift. If there's something missing, I don't have to release the product that we made. And then at the same time, I can send them an email back saying, hey, you know, you need to do this because I don't have the information I need. But also at the same time, if I don't want to send an email or, hey, they don't check their email, I can take the tablet with me, go directly to them, show them, say, hey, what's this? Why is it highlighted? And we can fix it directly, which is great. However, technology, while it's great and magical and wonderful, it's never the silver bullet. So what we did notice, or what some of the issues that we had or opportunities for improvement, is we did have system failures. So there were there were times where our system had crashed altogether, where we had to pull out those hard copy documents again and still reuse them while the system was up and coming. We've had instances also where new employees that come in didn't really know how to use the system, so it was constant state of training. If you have a great team, it makes it a little easier, but because if in manufacturing, at least in my experience with our production staff, they have a tendency to come and go at times, and it makes it very difficult that everyone knows how to fill out the documentation appropriately, that, you know, when they have to send it, at what time, at the end of their shift, who they have to notify, who has to sign off on it, which also makes it a bit of a challenge. One of the other things that we had noticed too in the very, very beginning with uploading our documents is really making sure that the questions made sense. So in our training is really kind of where we identified the pitfalls with the original documentation, the hard copies that we had for so long, and it really made us understand that people have been doing this document for so long that they just filled in a box. And so uploading it into a new template was very strange for a lot of people, and after rereading the questions that they've been answering for, what, 5, 10 years, some of them, seeing it in a new format didn't make any sense to them. Like, this question doesn't make sense, or, you know, I don't really know why we're even checking this, or, you know, this is more of a quality issue, not a food safety issue. This needs to be taken off. So it really made us reevaluate the type of documentation that we're making them sign, and at the same time, it was really refreshing to know, like, that some of the things that we had put in place really weren't applicable even today. I mean, as we all know, manufacturing food, all of it's very dynamic. It's constantly changing. And I think that's one of the things that really helps us get a better handle on electronic documentation and really implementing it. So again, great things from it. There's a lot of good, right? So user-friendly, no more boxes, not tons and tons of paperwork. But at the same time, there are things that are going to cause issues and problems and headaches. So I just want everyone to be aware that if you're interested or excited or really looking at implementing electronic documentation, yeah, I mean, it's going to save time and energy and efficiency all around, but just be prepared and be ready that there are some things that might cause headaches, problems, pitfalls, and just be aware that, you know, they're there and that they exist. I mean, maybe it's going to go 100% smoothly for you, maybe not. But again, to be honest with you, I wouldn't change a thing because I'm saving my quality team tons of time. I'm saving myself time. I'm saving my production staff a ton of time. And finally, I'm getting through audits where I can simply show them something I can pull up on a database, and we look at it for maybe 2-3 seconds, and we move on to something else versus digging through paperwork, trying to find what I'm looking for, giving it to the auditor, and then potentially seeing any issues or problems if something isn't filled out appropriately, if someone didn't sign off on it, if there's like a left blank, if there's, you know, in a comment section, put product on hold. I can't really answer that from something that happened 3-4 months ago. Shoot, I can't even answer that from 2 days ago. I forget. But having it electronic, what's great is there's nothing that I can hand edit there. It's done. It's finished. And with the notifications that have been put in place for me, I can directly and quickly catch it versus waiting a couple weeks, months, or even when there's an auditor here, like saying, hey, show me the last year worth of documentation that you have. So in addition to the documentation, electronic documentation that we're seeing on the floor, a lot of what the company that I currently work for is really excited about, or that they spend a lot of time thinking about, is continuous improvement. So one of the great things about the boss that I currently have is he's constantly looking for applications for technology in the facility. Again, we have a facility that's been built probably in the 60s and 70s, so it's a little dated, a little old, but a lot of investment goes back into technology because, and I'm sure most of you know, there are some auditors that really like having paper and looking through it and having something to hold on to. But what we're seeing in industry now, or at least for me and the different trade shows that I've been to, IFT, even, you know, going through FSMA training, PCQI training, a lot of it's transitioning to and getting to a point where we should really be utilizing the technology because it makes the things, I should say, more efficient, more effective. It makes things a little easier. So what we're currently working on now, so we've rolled out our on-the-floor documentation, but in-house, I'm working with my SQF coordinator to really using the SQF Level 3 auditing code and building a system, electronic system, where we can do the whole code, going through it, and then updating documents, forms, policies, procedures, verification, and validation within the system itself. So really the ultimate goal and hope is that when we do have our auditors come in, whether it be the FDA, SQF, I mean, even an auditor from a customer, anyone could really open the system. I mean, I prefer it to be me or the SQF coordinator, but again, hey, we win the lotto, we're moving on to something else. that anyone can really open the system and it's all there. And really the only thing that you're managing or mandating at this point is that it be updated with the most recent rev or revision. And we're currently working with Safety Chain right now to build within the system that, you know, we can make edits and changes to those revisions if it's possible. So that way it's not having multiple databases where say, hey, this is documentation, this is, you know, editing those documents, and then you can upload it there. We're trying to do it all within the system. So we've actually trialed this a couple weeks ago and just to see if it worked. So we uploaded the entire new edition of 8 code for SQF. And for those who have it, you know, 7.2 came out, now we have 8.0. And what was great about it was similar to what we've done with our documentation and auditing process out on the line with paperwork for production is that similar drop-down menus, we can make attachments, we can add things in there. And we got through the whole code probably in a couple hours, maybe 3 or 4 hours, everything. All 265 questions, everything was there, everything was what we needed. So now it seems like the only thing that will hold us back, one, for making sure everything is in there that needs to be in there and is updated appropriately, is really how fast the auditor wants to go through all of their data, or our data, I should say. It might be something simple now where, you know, we get an auditor and they have a 3-day schedule, and 2 of those days can be spent in their hotel room reviewing documentation and really coming to us one day just to come look at the floor. And in my opinion, that's really kind of what's really important, right? I mean, you can build policies and plans and procedures, but if you're not following them out on the floor, what good are they? So that's one of the things that we're really excited about. In addition to that, we did one of our internal GMP audit walkthroughs using this exact same software system. So again, there, 30, 40 pages worth of, you know, glass and brittle plastics review, looking at different departments, looking at different locations, you know, how are GMPs, are people washing their hands. I got it all down into maybe 1 or 2 templates that I'm using at a time, which is really great because saving me a bunch of time. I don't have to sign off on every document. It's all there. I can print it out if I want to. I can save it in the cloud. And if anyone really wants to see it or asks to see it, it's really simple, attaching pictures and just opening it versus, hey, let me get out this binder, let me show you this month, let me show you next month. It's all there for me. And what's even better is we're getting to a point now also where we can start doing trending and tracking on these things that we're finding so that way we can see really where our problem areas are. One of the things that we're hoping to work on, so plans for the future, are looking at our supplier approval process. So I'm not sure the type of folks that are on the line, but for us, again, having 150 different finished product types, we have a variety of different suppliers with a whole lot of different raw ingredients. And so really for us, one of the trials and tribulations that we have is monitoring the system so that we know and get notifications of when something expires. Currently we're using something very similar to Excel, and we have someone monitoring and maintaining it and looking at it every single day versus getting a notification like, say, the production documentation that we're getting, or, you know, within our own auditing system that we're building with SQF, if something's missing, we get a notification as well. It would be great for us because with, again, 150 different 150 different products, all those raw materials have to be maintained. And so instead of looking at it daily, just getting an email or a ping saying, hey, this kosher certificate's expired, or hey, we don't have the newest audit report, third-party audit report for this vendor, versus going into Excel and looking through the whole list and trying to figure out where it's coming from. Also, what would be really great and that we don't currently have because we have such a variety of different materials that come into us is a list of suppliers that are approved. I can get you currently to a place where I have a ton of folders, probably over, well, I would say 300 or 400 folders with the 300 or 400 different people that supply us with raw ingredients. But I can't give you a whole list of each material from which vendor it comes from. I can give you some documents, but it'll take me a long time just because of the very manual and not yet automated process. So we're really kind of looking at that, or hoping to look at that. And lastly, again, one of the things that's on the plate looking into the future is documentation from a standpoint of revisions. So some people have document coordinators, and that's great. I envy you. I really wish I had one as well. But we don't have that yet. We are very limited in who has the ability to change, edit, update, or fix any type of documentation, even if it's like a spelling error or punctuation. But really how we're doing it now is we have a Word file, we open it, we edit it, we make a PDF, and then we put it on 2 or 3 other networks that are and have access to that document. So if you can only imagine, you know, yearly, right, you're supposed to look through all your documents, but really trying to track down where all of those documents are, and if people are printing them off or saving them somewhere on their desktop, it's really hard to manage that system. And what the hope is with our electronic system is that we get to a point where we can do that all internally, and that way everyone's going to be using the system just to be looking at the documents, not, you know, on a shared drive or on someone's desktop or, you know, on the floor in someone's drawer, you know, that's stuffed behind the wrenches or something like that. So really there's tons of application for technology in our industry specifically, and I think that really the sky's the limit at this point. And what I hope for is we get to a point where we can automate it, not only to save us time, energy, headaches, but it makes everything a lot faster for when we do have those auditors come into our facility, whether it's customer, FDA, or, you know, our certifying agencies who say, yeah, you make good quality, safe food. I've talked with our auditor who, or I should say the auditing body, and telling them about what we're implementing, and they seem really excited about it too, because, I mean, the other side of the coin, it's a lot of time for those auditors to come to us, spend a couple days, look through information, and maybe sometimes they feel like they're missing something, or maybe sometimes they feel like, you know, I would rather spend my time out on the floor. And so I really think this implementation of documentation to an electronic database would be really beneficial for a lot of people. So with that, I guess that's the end. Please, if you have any questions or stories to share or anything else, please feel free to ask. It's really like an open session. I'm here to answer anything I can, whatever my pitfall was, in addition to what I found out, to, you know, what do you really like about this, or hey, like, what do you really not like about this? Please feel free to let me know, and I'll be happy to answer. And so with that, I'll give it back to Brian, and feel free to ask any questions.
Very, very good. Well, first, thanks, Bridget. You covered a lot of ground, and that was fantastic. And we do have some good questions. So I'll just start firing away. We got some time here, so I'll just grab them kind of as they've come in and fire them away. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, perfect. So one came in a little bit early on and was more technical in nature, so we can maybe take this one offline, but I'll fire away because it was a very thoughtful question. And the question was, FSMA's final rule on sanitary transportation of human animal food does not provide much specificity, easy for me to say, around what is sanitary, quote unquote. So are there recognized sanitary transport standards which can be agreed upon? Any thoughts or experience around that for you guys?
Sure, yeah, it's a great question. So what I would say too, out of anything, is currently I would say that's probably the one area within FSMA that is lacking the most. Ingredients coming into our facilities and just making the products that we can our best bet is we can monitor it the best we can, whether it's food or, you know, animal feed. But once it hits that trailer and gets out the door, it's really, really difficult. I'll give you a story where we actually, coming into our facility, raw materials from our supplier, not our supplier, but even trucking companies, they sent us, I think it was like raspberry that came in, you know, boxes, IQF, so frozen raspberry, and they also had on the same trailer, we had poison, so we couldn't obviously accept it. Yeah, surprise. But from a standpoint of sanitary, so one of the things that you really should look out for is you should have a trailer inspection coming in and leaving. Coming in, one of the best things to do is, you know, you want to smell for any off odors, flavors, or tastes, anything that's on the floor. I would say from a safety standpoint, if you see any holes, anything that could potentially like break through the bottom, if it doesn't seem safe, if things are breaking off, because one, if you're loading those with forklifts, or say maybe you work for a company that has LGVs or laser guided vehicles, these things are really heavy, and even pallets themselves, depending on what you're making and getting them on there, it's kind of a safety concern. But also at the same time, if that drops through a trailer, that's stuck there and we can't do anything. I would say the other thing too is really hold your freights accountable for what they're doing. I know it's very hard and very difficult at times. Working in the water industry, I had something very similar where we had a trailer come in that was full of onions. Onions don't belong in a water facility. Not exactly sure how that happened. Right. But what we did was we rejected 2 or 3 loads they kept sending to us, and it cost us time, money, and energy, but they had to eat, they, meaning the freight, had to eat the costs of that. And so after a while, we learned to stop doing business with them, or we told them, like, hey, we're not doing business with you anymore because you're not following these procedures, these plans, these things that we have in place. And not everyone in production really likes that. Not everyone in purchasing really likes that, or even in the warehouse, but it's really holding your freight accountable. Even recently, we had a very similar issue with garlic and finished product where our freight didn't clean out the trailer appropriately from a sanitary standpoint, didn't wash it out, and we had some residual off odor onto our finished product. So what we did was we held them accountable. They're paying for the credit from our customer because they rejected the whole load because they said it smelled like garlic. They wanted icing, not garlic. So from a sanitary standpoint, I'll be honest with you, great question. You know, there aren't anything, I don't think that's in place. And again, that's something that's really far behind FSMA rules and regulations. But if you have a really great trailer inspection plan in place, utilize it and turn people away because if anything, you know, it comes back to a name, to your brand. Sure. But at the same time, they need to be held accountable for what they're doing because they're the ones that are transporting what you're making. I mean, you can make it as safe as you want, but once it gets out that door and on the road, I mean, all bets are really kind of off.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you going into a little bit of your experience there, and I'll add on the technology side where I like your approach of holding them accountable because we've seen some of our customers do just an amazing job at digitally scorecarding their vendors. So like you said, pushing back, you know, kind of holding them accountable, but then also being able to track that when you have so many, as you mentioned, right, for 150 products, you start to get an idea of who's making your life miserable and who's really a great vendor to work with. So the technology can support that too. Another question came in earlier was around PCQI, and you mentioned about, you know, your people, which I think is an important part of this, and making sure you have the right people. Do you have folks in the facility that are PCQI, or any thoughts on that, or what your standards are there in terms of hiring or putting people on your team for that?
Sure, that's a great question. So everyone within the quality department has gone to FSMA training in my department. So I have like 7, 8 people, which is smaller than some companies, say like maybe like Kraft Foods. That might be very difficult. But one of the hardest things, I think, especially working in manufacturing or quality, food quality, is that getting the buy-in on why it's so important and, you know, why we have these standards and why FSMA exists. So if you can, send some of your production people, your warehouse people, your purchasing people to food safety training and get PCQI. So we currently have internally, we have 100 people in our facility, and we have about 15 PCQI people. So as you can imagine, there's a couple obviously in quality, but I do have production supervisors, plant managers, I have production managers, I have purchasing, I have a whole host of people that are PCQI trained for a couple of reasons. Okay. One, so that they get a better idea or understanding of food safety, but at the same time, getting their buy-in has helped substantially getting the people out on the floor.
There you go.
Knowledge or understanding of like, hey, like, do you really want to give grandma this product that could potentially have a foreign material in it? Probably not. Sure. And it's really kind of like bringing it home because a lot of it is dependent on them knowing where it's going and why it's so important. Because I think that's what's forgotten a lot in manufacturing is it's day in, day out. It's really much the same thing. We're making the same thing over and over again, but people forget that it's food or that someone's going to consume it or you're like, you know, Aunt Millie's going to eat it. And just really kind of bringing it home is what I think helps a lot of people really understand why it's so important that like, oh yeah, I have to change my gloves or, oh, I should probably wash my hands after I go to the bathroom. So. Yep.
No, I appreciate that. That's good. We all want Aunt Millie to be okay, so that's good.
Yeah. Right.
we touched on, this is a good question, and it's a bit of a, I think we touched on the answer a little bit, but if you have anything to add, kind of a follow-up around suppliers, someone was asking that, you mentioned you had a supplier approval process. Do you have a risk management model in place, something that helps identify your approved vendors and deliver a risk management model that allow you to isolate suppliers that are causing you risk. So we were just talking about some of the digital scorecarding, but I know you mentioned you're also kind of doing something in Excel for the time being, but I know it's something we're working on together. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so part of our policy that exists for our supplier approval is there's a variety of documentation that we require and request from new suppliers for raw ingredients that are coming in, and this is mostly consumable products or anything that's product contact. So yeah, maybe some plastics, like if you're making pouches or, you know, corrugate or something like that. But so it's a variety of documentation that's required, and probably the biggest four are third-party audits. And if they don't have that, it's important to have someone from your company that's internal auditor training, which you could get, you know, at ASQ or something like that, and then going and actually auditing the facility. The second is an allergen statement. The third is a certificate of insurance. And then the last is their food safety plan, if they've got anything. Some places do, some places don't. And then from that standpoint, and there's a variety of other things that we ask for, but those are the four main ones. Then from there, right, depending on what the product type is, the FDA has a really great guideline, draft version of high-risk raw ingredients that includes everything from spices like cinnamon to eggs. And what it does is it calls out, and anyone go to the FDA website, they've got it there for you, check it out, especially if you're doing food safety plans as well. It calls out biological, chemical, and physical hazards that pertain to that particular ingredient. And then what we'll do is a risk analysis based on that, very similar to a food safety plan risk analysis where we'll identify what the product is, say it's eggs, go through what it potentially could be, as in like what its hazards are and how we're mitigating that risk. And so a lot of the times for us, not every product that we run has a cook-kill step. And what we really rely on is our supplier approval process. So that way we have their third-party audit, we have their allergen statement, certificate of insurance, and their, you know, how they're mitigating the risk. And then we'll do our own internal risk and try to figure out is this a good supplier? If it's not, we're not going to use you and we're going to go on to somebody else.
Right, right. Great specific tips there. Thank you. That's perfect. This is a question about something you mentioned that it was funny. You were joking. You said, "Oh, I wish I had some extra help," but you glossed over this one a bit. About you said, you know, you've reduced your paperwork 30 to 50%. So how does that translate into actual time that you're saving? And I think you had mentioned it across several of the groups, right? Your quality group and your safety group, production. Do you have any sense of what the actual time savings or ROI has been for this process for you?
Sure, yeah, so I don't have an established KPI around time saved, but what I can say probably per week from a quality standpoint, just quality, because that's probably the one that I'm most intimately knowledgeable about.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say probably anywhere for a whole week's time, I would say anywhere between 4 to 5 hours. So, and that's because of just the different product types that we run and getting through all the documents and the follow-up. So for me, that helps me out a lot because quality, one of the things that I'm constantly battling is getting through our food safety plans, and while they're there, it's really important for me to have that additional help. Also, there's a lot of projects that I have in place that don't really pertain to necessarily food safety. It's more like housekeeping or like understanding retains or sending out my people to get training. But getting like 4 to 5 hours a week, that gives me an opportunity to either, one, allow vacation time, you know, easily, sending people out for training, or like getting them to come to additional meetings that I really could use their support on because they're the most knowledgeable on, you know, the process and the testing versus me who's just like, oh, yeah, we do this testing, but I'm not really intimately involved in, you know, how it's exactly being done.
Right, and that's just you, so that's a heck of a start there. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Since the topic was around audit, I have a question for you. So what how's the audit changed for you? You gave some great insight into conversation with the auditors you've worked with recently. How is an audit different now than it was before? Because that was kind of one of the main points of takeaways I'd really like the audience to hear from your perspective.
Sure. So what I would say from before, I would say, well, I've had a variety of different auditors throughout my career. And prior to the implementation of FSMA, I've had some, well, most of them have gone through each single question in the code that we get audited for and go through every single question, whether it's applicable to even what we're doing, but every single one. And now what it seems like for me is a lot of focus is more on food safety, food defense, and food fraud, which is great, I think. It's less mundane. It's not like, hey, show me when the last time was that you cleaned out your air vent in your bathroom. It's, hey,
right.
What is the, I'm trying to think, what is when's the last time that you had your scale calibrated for fill weights because of food fraud? We want to make sure that you're putting all the stuff in there that needs to be in there. So I would say that's helped a lot. And then with the implementation of this electronic documentation, and primarily for us using Safety Chain, what's really helped is, since we utilized it a little bit last year and we're able to show it off a bit to our auditor, he was really floored by the fact that, it's not just piles and piles of documents that he has to look through now. It's his main focus is on food safety, and for us, it's much easier to go through this spreadsheet or this document that's been automated and get directly to a question versus looking through tons and tons of paperwork to get to a point where it's like, oh, okay, this is, this is our time and temperature check, and this is it through a few different products. Oh, and here, by the way, here's the temperature chart that you need to see. Now I can pull all that data, get it all in one place, like this is everything that you need to look at for a whole year. And he's much more happy and pleased, just so it's easy and accessible.
Great. No, good. Thanks for sharing that. And I'll finish with this one too. You mentioned in the beginning, that you obviously love technology. You touched on how you have an owner who's very proactive in this area, and that a lot of people may get excited hearing your story, but it's not the silver bullet. So I really appreciate the transparency there. Right there is a process, and there are things to consider. Do you have any tips for those that maybe don't have as proactive or forward-thinking of ownership or executive team, and how they would get buy-in or build a business case around technology, or did you still have to do that even with a more proactive person looking for technology?
Sure. So I think that's a great question. So I did have to do some buy-in because this was very new to everyone, and again, change is very scary for most. But prior to coming to Sokol, working in the food industry, we also used another database system that working in water, where it was all electronic. And again, it was implemented like halfway through my career while working there. And there's a lot of pushback there. But once it got to a place where it was working and working efficiently, I think a lot of people were really comfortable with it. So for me, at least, it was having the experience before and saying, hey, yeah, you're going to get pitfalls, there's going to be issues, but it really helps a lot. And I think it's really, to get buy-in, it's talking about the story as a full. So yeah, it not only does it help quality from the standpoint of like helping with audits and paperwork and documentation, but it helps free up a lot of people's time. And I think depending on what it is that you're trying to do and describe to, say, like your CEO or your boss, say like, yeah, let's do it.
Right.
Making that statement, it's really impactful, because with the more free time, there's more time to work on other things versus just paperwork or documentation. Yep. So out of anything, I would say if you're trying to get something similar to this, really investigate, like really dig deep into each department and seeing how that'll affect them. If you're removing, like 5-10 pages worth of paperwork every day, and then seeing how much time it really frees up for you and what else you can do. I think that's really kind of what influenced us to say, hey, this is great. And I mean, anytime you can make quality happy is always a good thing, right? Because, we're not always the happiest people.
Right, yeah. And there's a bottom line there too, right? It's a bit easier to measure on the quality side. So, but that's great. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I got to say, customers like you definitely make us better. And we're just really excited to see what you're going to be up to and building as you go forward. And I appreciate you sharing the story. I think there's a lot of good takeaways here. As we follow up, we'll provide a link to your LinkedIn profile, if that's okay, so people can connect with you there. And
love to.
That would be great. We'll have a recording. We'll have a link, as we mentioned, and get that out in the coming days. We also want to start building a whole resource library for everybody. So we've got downloads and surveys and all kinds of stuff through our other partners and other industry tools and resources that we have on our website. So if you're looking for more to learn, we got a ton of stuff. There's webinar recordings, videos, a lot of our FSMA Friday videos. If you haven't seen those, you can kind of pick through and find something applicable. or if you're looking for some help, right? So Bridgette was just talking about if you're starting that investigation, we're certainly happy to point you in the right direction, whether it's product info, maybe it's other partners or consultants or industry folks that we can connect you with. And we're certainly always willing to get on the phone and chat and kind of learn about what you're trying to do and see if we may be a fit, talk about a demo and that sort of thing as well. So, so again, we'll be adding this to our library. We're very, very excited, and we'll also be putting this into a written format soon, which you'll be able to download as well. So, Bridgette, fantastic. Thanks for sharing so much about your story, and really appreciate you making some time for being here today.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks so much. And everyone who was on the webinar, if you do have questions, comments, concerns, or just want some follow-up, I'm happy to help wherever I can. Again, my experience is probably and could be very different than yours, and I'm happy to share that story because, I mean, it's the best way we learn together because we're kind of all in it together, and we're just trying to get through it the best we can.
Yep. And it's perfectly said, and that's exactly what our goal is with this series, is to create that community where we can share that stuff, regardless of where you're working or what kind of technology you're using. We just want to help everybody. So, so thanks everybody for supporting us and being here, and all the great questions. And for any we didn't get to, we'll make sure and connect you with Bridgette offline. And thank you so much. Have a great day, and hopefully you'll join us next month for the next one. Thanks everybody.
Great. Thank you.